Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Bonnie, and I'm the Poetry Event Coordinator here at Brookline Booksmith. Today, it is my pleasure to host Natalya Sukhonos for the Third Thursday's Poetry Reading Series. Unfortunately, due to illness, Heidi Seaborn, who was originally scheduled, is unable to join us this evening. But we do hope to have her back maybe next month. So please do keep an eye out on our website if you're interested in seeing her. Before I do introductions, I have just a few housekeeping notes. Firstly, copies of Natalya's book are available for sale at the back counter there. Please support her work in whatever way you can, whether that means buying a book, following on social media, or saying nice things while you're here. And also, of course, being in this room is a great way to show support, so thank you. Secondly, please keep your phones off or on silent while Natalya is reading, and thank you for being considerate. Please also know the event is being live streamed right at this iPad. So our audience should mostly not be visible to our live stream viewers, but if you don't want to be live on YouTube, don't stand directly in front of it and you'll be golden. And then finally, we will have a Q&A at the end of the event, followed by a signing. So hold your questions until the end, but definitely have some ready to go. As I said before, this reading is a part of the monthly poetry series here at Booksmith. It takes place on, you guessed it, the third Thursday of each month. And our April lineup should be announced relatively soon. So please keep an eye out on our website if you'd like to see more poetry here. All right, housekeeping out of the way, now for introductions. A native of Odessa, Ukraine, Natalya Sukhonos is a multilingual speaking Russian, English, and Ukrainian Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Italian. She holds a PhD in comparative literature from Harvard. Beyond Odessa, she's lived in New York City, New Haven, Boston, Rio de Janeiro, San Francisco, and Istanbul. Natalya is a poet, scholar, and teacher deeply committed to the power of language to uplift, inspire, and defamiliarize us with the ordinary. Natalya is equally comfortable teaching literature and creative writing to children, as well as to college students and older adults. Nominated for the Pushcart Prize in 2015 and 2020, and the Best New Poets Anthology of 2015, she came out with Parachute in 2016 from Kelsey Books, and A Stranger Home from Moon Pie Press, in 2020. Natalya loves to experiment with poetic forms, space on the page, and multilingual writing. Her third and latest book is Sunlight Trapped in Stone, which came out this year from Green Writers Press, and which we are here to celebrate. Natalya, thank you so much for being here this evening. Everyone, let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I don't know if the mic is on. Aha, this is better. Thank you so much for having me, Bonnie. I really appreciate it. Thank you everyone so much for coming. It means a lot. It means so much to see familiar faces, new faces. As most of you know, I went to school here in Boston. I did my PhD in Comp Lit, and so it just feels nice to be able to come back to Boston many years later and still feel like it's home. Okay, so I'm gonna read some poems. The first poem I'm gonna read is something called a prefatory poem, which is the poem that comes in the very beginning of a collection. It's called Ars Poetica with Spider and Peaches. Mount St. Helens in ashes. Enter the ballooning spider who sends a long silken thread into the molten core, only to let go. The wind picks up the thread, springs it, strums it, pizzicato, stills it to a halt. Is art the act of casting a net into fiery nothingness? Is it the flight of silk over and into the dark? Is it the wind playing with thread? Or is it a letting go, as when a poem conjures a bowl of peaches, the way the summer light becomes still around their contours, then gleams over our faces with a painterly halo. When the sun is behind us, we reach for the peaches, orange-pink orbs, almost obscene in their jouissance. As our teeth pierce through their skin sorted with juice and pulp, the poem ends before we achieve grace, before the spider, weaver of tales, makes contact with fire. So that's the first poem. The other poems are going to come from different sections of the book. The first section is called Fossilized Sunlight. And the poem that I'm going to read is called Dreaming Odessa. Odessa is my place of birth. It is an amazing city close to the Black Sea in Ukraine. That's all you need to know. Well, actually, I will tell you that the first quotation in Ukrainian means everything will be Ukraine, which is something that has been said, a common slogan during the war and attributed to Volodymyr Zelensky. Dreaming Odessa. 1. The young girl summons the Black Sea, breathing gruffly like a caged animal. An old world dame clad in black night, gasping for air, singed across the waste by Langeron Beach with its blinding white stairs. She summons Atlantis, holding up the globe on Gogol Street. The globe is tender blue, speckled with little yellow stars, the colors intoning 30 years before the war. Все буде Україна. She's eating apricot ice cream by a tasteless monument of a lion tearing apart flesh for its young. In the park, every hour on the hour, the booming radio deafens her in a plea to not forget the war even her mother did not witness. Yet this fear is exhilarating, like light that changes a room when you least expect it. How the cathedral square blossoms at night, which swoops down on her like a raven or blackbird, enormous, delicate, glistening. Sometimes old women peer at her from courtyards lined with chestnut trees. They chuck shells from sunflower seeds while they mutter under their breath. So much of her childhood seems to take flight in passageways, doors, tunnels to another world. Everything is foreign. Everything is familiar. For many years, she'd watched the scaffolding go up on the building across from Cathedral Square. When her family left for the States, it was still in shambles. With his missing fingers and World War II ID, her grandfather would break through long caves to buy milk with tiny yellow papers that passed for money. Packs of butter simply said masla. Bread was chlieb, a platonic ideal without variety, though the 3 kopeck roll was an ochre ball shriveled like an old woman's hand, while the 9 kopeck one was glowing red and speckled with poppy seeds. The solid brick of coffee and cream tempted her with its sweet, milky taste, but left her mouth tinged with bitterness. 3. She remembers the tiny crawfish wrapped in newspaper, the fire-baked potatoes at her dacha, the parasitic snails her friend's husband would fry and grind to a paste, the forbidden pierogi her grandfather bought her in secret, the hot bread she tore into pieces and ate on the bridge, the sweet cherries her friend brought all dangling in a chain she had to undo with her mouth open, trying to catch the wonder, the promise, her face like colored vermilion from the effort, the pits thrown carelessly on the ground, the shadows from the heavy bridge ornaments, buoyant in late summer night. The next poem is called After Bishop. It has an epigraph: "The art of losing isn't hard to master," from One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. 2 days after our birth, gloved hands removed my twin from her crib into Odessa sandstone. It took 12 years for me to learn of her demise. At 9, I lost a country. Books, tickets, wallets, documents would split between unruly fingers. Sometimes Russian words for things I love, the way night brings fullness to the trees, would flee like strays in the blue-black of night. At 21, I lost my grandfather. Handsome in his fedora, Andrei scavenged old Odessa streets for the best pierogi and apricot ice cream. In his sunlit room, he'd cry to Soviet war movies like Chapayev, laugh at jokes older than my mom. He had warm hands, a gentle, steady gait. For an hour, he huddled at the bus stop to welcome me from college. 3 years later, I was the one waiting in vain. Then I lost you, Mama. You with your opal-ringed hands and velvet dresses. You whose bright mouth defined presence. You who danced to my baby's first steps. Your loss leaves me still gasping for breath. In the Madrid Salumeria, you and I were drunk on wine the color of blood. They say 20 years, but I remember my dead baby every day. This loss, a splinter in your sunny days, a limp, a small star, daily dying in your blood. A sinking dullness settles in my spine. I hold it close, peer into its gray and curtained chambers. Okay, sorry, all these poems are kind of downers. We'll read a more uplifting poem soon. But before that, I will read a poem entitled Aunt Sasha's Dementia. All you need to know for this one is Aunt Sasha was a dearly beloved grandmother. Everyone called her aunt. She immigrated with us from Ukraine, and this is the poem that speaks to her. Aunt Sasha's Dementia. When I enter her room for a moment, I think she has disappeared. She huddles on one side of the bed. The children are coming, and they need to be fed and put to sleep. Candy wrappers everywhere and sunflower seeds rolling onto the floor, lost underneath the bed, spinning into the dark as memories of Holodomor and the urgent searching for food for the frailest mixed with the banal American present, when food made by her home attendant sits out for hours, assumes a sickening sheen. In early childhood, I'd find treasures in the attic, a marble with a lilac glow, a button with ridges. Suddenly, they disappear as if they never were. Aunt Sasha would spin long tales of the steel factory where she worked in Kriveich, the early tragedies of losing the school money, her older brothers who never came back from the war. Her voice modulated like wind moving through velvet curtains in the theater. Memory is a treasure box jealously guarding its jewels, then hiding them in the deep dark. Every year, as the treasure box inches to a close, darkness seeps into her stories. Did you regret never training to become a doctor because of your religion? Was it a betrayal when I stopped believing in God? I do not get to ask. In her last year, when she said my baby daughter was a beautiful boy, I'd whisper, "What will you feed those children coming for shelter? Would the matzo pierogi or the scattered gold of fried potatoes sate their hunger? How would you live with yourself if they stopped visiting you, demanding your blanket, making each night an urgent plea to God or beyond to pause this grand Baroque spinning wheel of fate and sadness written in the stars. Just gonna check on the time. Okay, still doing okay here. Okay, I'm gonna jump to a different section of the book. The second section is called Border Crossings. Just give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So I'm going to read a poem in this section called Journey Through Ladaga. This poem came from a translation project I participated in after the full-scale invasion. What I did was I actually translated and edited the testimony of ordinary Ukrainians during the war, and there is now an archive of this testimony on uawitness.com. And this poem is based on one of those pieces of testimony. All you need to know here is didus. Didus is a Ukrainian word for grandfather. Journey Through Ladaga, based on the testimony of Marina from Kyiv. Clutching the steering wheel, my didus warmed his hands in rags that he had set on fire as he drove through ice sheets and landmines to deliver parcels of food to the Leningrad blockade. My didus, Naumenka Grigori Yevdokimovich, lived in Kyiv. He'd never seen Leningrad ballets, nor the elegant symmetry of its bridges, the arches gracing the mirror of the Neva. But he'd heard of corpses lying in the street, of people delirious after eating sawdust, carpenter's glue, library paste, window putty, and plaster. For my didus who survived Holodomor, famine was a childhood companion. In 1943, at 19, my didus drove through blizzards, crossed Lake Ladaga, the road of life for the starving. In the ancient Valam monastery by the lake, the monks would pray for the hungry, their voices drowned by the winter wind. A black star would land on ice, then blossom into 1,000 cracks. The next car over would disappear under enemy fire. My didus didn't live to be 100 this year. He didn't see Russians kidnapping Ukrainian children, selling the country's grain to someone hunger in his land, like a sorcerer summoning spirits with the flick of a palm. 80 years ago, he drove forth into the darkness. The food he carried warmed his path. The smoldering flame reminded him where to seek the light. Grigori Yevdokimovich, it is there, the flame of your life, smoldering still. All right. I promise I have some more uplifting poems. I will read a poem that is sadly more relevant now even than when I wrote it in 2017. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's about illegal crossings in the United States. I think all you need to know is that sangre means blood in Spanish. Over the border and then nowhere. Death by desire, to hear the swish of her red skirt, the squeak of his leather jacket, and not mistake the breeze of the open door for a future scuffle. First the vultures smell chemicals a body gives off after its demise. Then they pick the body clean and save the limbs in the hideaway. The desert welcomes migrants like dead guests that arrive in the night. Case 0435 died more than a mile from the nearest road with an unscuffed Gregor baseball in his backpack. Case 0519 carried Psalms and Revelation torn from a Spanish Bible. Case 0377 kept a single grain of rice inside a hollow cross. One side of the grain read Sarah and the other read Rigom. death by sky, the yawn of a gray desert that fuses horizon with ground, pulverizing the rest with golden dust. Death is a border between sangre y sangre, the fences of home and the maw of a strange land, an undulating metal curtain, a wire mesh, a plain fence. Case 0469 was found with a bracelet, a simple green ribbon tied in a knot. The cases referred to New York Times journalists who tried to identify decomposed bodies in the desert according to their possessions. Okay, and now moving on to something more cheerful, I want to read you a poem about my daughter, who is 11. November Warmth in Thatcher Park. Thatcher Park is a lovely park in Albany, where I live, and where these lovely friends and relatives visited me. November warmth in Thatcher Park. Bare feet, a pale sun dash on the grass mid-November. The stalks breathe in frost in the morning, exhale meager warmth that afternoon. Naomi rests on the green mound as if it were summer, and we have nowhere else to go. I slither next to her, two lizards sunning themselves before winter darkens the sky, sends the sun back to slumber. As I watch Naomi's profile turn amber in the autumn light, her cat eyes slant toward the hawks in flight over the foggy mountains, toward the soft brown feathers of grass. Her gaze roams back towards the firs surrounding us. The grass caresses our feet with a tingly promise before the air gets crisp, urgent, bidding us to flee, burrow the sun within us, shelter it from winter. Okay, I have a little bit more time, so I'm going to read a couple of poems from the last section. The last section is called Limpid Stone. The first poem, What If? I think it's pretty obvious, but I'll just say it anyway, that it was written during the pandemic, and it refers to a strange fact that I learned about butterflies. What if? Split open, a caterpillar in a chrysalis, its faceless goo. 2 days later, it's a monster of beauty with wing veins and maelstrom of color, the power of flight. What if quarantine ripens us for transformation? After sheltering in our homes, we emerge with a changed face. The streets smell of wet asphalt as if rain has fallen on the city, and the light changes to a feathery, pellucid haze. Silence falls on the city, a certain hush, a split second before the folded wings unravel. The body tenses. The little larva angel flings itself into the blue, forgets it used to crawl, spreads its extremities, surrenders to the wind, the falling light. Okay, and keeping up with the more optimistic bent, maybe, of this section, I'm going to read a poem. I thought it was obvious, but then my husband read it, and it was not obvious, but I'll just tell you that this poem is about the experience of a dear friend who went through IVF successfully. But in the poem, you don't know that yet, and it's in that kind of uncertain point. Alchemy. 1. We will lament those slow, violet evenings we've spent by the window waiting, afraid to make the slightest shift to the room's ratio of light galloping, crisscrossing shadows. At night, our voices are thin and lonely, like voices of children frightened by the screech of a car, the growl of a nocturnal animal. We will wonder about the gloved fingers touching our stark ingredients of life, spinning egg and sperm into a thing that's alive with the quiet stealth of a master chef, spinning a souffle from air and sweetness. Do these fingers bear a wedding band, nails polished or bitten raw? Are they hands that caress a piano, the spine of a cat? Do we trust them more than we trust our bodies? 2. The doctor's voice is low. We run out of breath, spinning circles round that petri dish. Carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen once bathed in the primordial soup, and from this lazy lolling of gases were born stars and grasses. We're ready for a flower to furiously split itself in 2, then 4, then 8. We're also ready for nothing. The phone rings. You make a lunge for the door, then stop. We have nowhere else to go. Okay, I'm just gonna read a couple more. This one is about the experience of going camping in the capital region and having it rain the whole time. Storm Sistina. During the storm, the cedars rise above us, their branches a royal mess of wings. The colors of the forest beat brighter, faster, after the rain turns each face inside out, deepens the veins on the cedar bark, makes the lake rise with steam, comes to a halt. When the rain brings all light to a halt and tree trunks sway in a dark rhythm, guide us to search for writing in the wayward bark, or let the rain patter slip sibilant into a winged offering, a lover's whisper, filling out into a song of water and sky moving faster, closer, lilting into a spell, tilting faster into a spiral that spins day, night to a blinking halt. We are wet, hungry, no fire in sight. Glum, we go out and the rain drum beats in our throats, shakes us free of worry and words as we drive under the night's wing, our stories etched silently into the cedar bark. After the rain, the light folds softly into the bark. The day unravels, comes undone faster, in the silent woods where a raven's wing brushes the cedars, brings the kids' whispers to a halt. In the tent, an owl's hoot frightens us. We dream of summer, of slipping out from days and houses, schedules spinning out of our fingers as a web caught on the rough bark. In the morning, light awakens us. Our limbs, light, limber, and lift, move faster, pull us closer to grasses and trees, grinding sadness to a halt as we run to the lake, hear a cascade of wings, while eagles, cranes, and geese rise above us. Their wings stitch lake and sky in silver, swoop out and hover by our faces. The rain comes to a halt as water fills the grooves of the cedar bark. A giant map of forest movements courses through our veins. Stars fill us with longing, while cedars watch us as our strides grow more somber, hearts beat faster, with rain, the birds, the crisscrossed wayward bark. Okay, I'm going to read 2 more, and that will be probably it. I wrote this poem about my cat, and it's called Being. And it revolves around, I don't know how many of you here have pets, but if we have pets, we have to feed them, and there are certain tasks associated with them, and usually, it's great, but sometimes it gets kind of annoying if you have other creatures that you have to take care of, such as small children. So this poem is about that. Being. An arrow, slick, smooth, slips through the back porch door, flashes green in the dark, roams the yellowing stalks of October grass, becomes a roiling spring, returns to her tower in the living room, to a murmuring stillness. Many days, being, your morning demands cut into my waking hours. Once you scorned my games before your evening meal, and the toy ended up hitting your back before I realized my foolishness. There were tears, the leaden stun of embarrassment. I had hurt an animal. I'm no longer the person I thought myself to be. The silver flash quickening of your form, your warmth zigzagging in my kitchen, I met with violence, for you didn't deign to dance with my commands. In regret, I became the ghostly form of someone living in the fog of the past, too ashamed to come up for air. I gave you treats and asked for forgiveness to calm the throbbing din of the heart, but your round head already grazed my pillow as you nuzzled me there in the dark, and I felt you're more than this coil of warmth, this whirl of fur, of high-pitched sweetness, more even than the gift from my mother, because as you showed up in my Brooklyn kitchen 9 years ago, you were already home, felt like a piece of my home, while I come up empty-handed against your cozy calico form, your sleeping spiral of cat spirit, the arch of your back spooled in delight. And this last poem, I just want to say, I don't know about you, I would like spring to finally be here. It is not here in Boston. It is not, certainly not here, there in the capital region where I live. But so be it. Oblivion interrupted. When the hissing wind grinds to a halt before I scheme my way out of the full moon languor of winter, I tense up in my four walls, close windows and doors, draw the curtains lest the milky gloom drown me in its melancholy song. I forget to feed the cat, put the air plants in water, bathe the kids on time. I forget to throw the stink bug outside the screen porch, and it crawls on my kitchen floor while my children scream. The dead come to me one by one, strange supplicants missing eyes or limbs. My grandpa reminds me I never watched that old Soviet movie I promised to share with him. My mother intones theatrically, you failed to create everlasting peace between me and your sister. My friend who died last week in California admonishes, you didn't write enough. I put my hands in my pockets and give them all a cold stare. Like blackbirds, they walk in my footsteps, darken the earth with their silhouettes, then flee. When the air is so cold it scrapes the back of my throat and blossoms into a sudden scream, I forget about the war in Ukraine, about Gaza and the migrants sent back to the wrong country. A snowdrift covers my heart, and I forget to listen to the dancing pines as they spin in a danse macabre facing the theater of the bare earth. Later, I will forget spring, its arrival brusque, breathless, as a late guest who couldn't make up his mind or alert that he's coming. I'll forget it in a heartbeat, but the singing sky, the warmth of my veins, the blue jays feeding so lusciously are preaching. Light will come. Let it loosen your limbs, lull your fears, hold the evils of this world at arm's length. Let the dead slip into a door of their own choosing. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Natalya, for sharing that lovely work with us. And now it is our audience's time to shine. So if folks have questions for our poet, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you.
Yes,
Yeah.
awesome.
It's amazing.
Thank
So
you.
gorgeous. I especially love rethinking COVID completely as a way to kind of come out of our cocoons. That was great. The question I have, because in more nonfiction, fiction writing, how do you approach putting together a book? We saw so many kinds of works in these three sections, but how do you sort of think about plan it, divide it into sections?
Wow, that's a great question. So I have to credit my friend here. My husband and I have this new friend who works with him at UAlbany. Her name is Sarah Garagosian, and she edited this a great collection of essays called Marbles on the Floor, which is kind of a funny way to refer to the chaos that you have, as a creative writer when you have, especially a poet, we poets are thinking is very associative, and my thinking is certainly very associative. I majored in comparative literature. And basically, that collection of essays really helped me. What I did often is I printed out all the poems, I color-coded patterns that I saw emerging. I tried to put poems together according to patterns, but also distance poems that didn't have those patterns. And those patterns included color, they included food, mentions of sunsets, for instance, hands, a lot of things like that. I also think, thematically, the collection is called Sunlight Trapped in Stone, and there is a poem I didn't read called Trapped in Amber in there that speaks to that. But the collection is really about how memory serves as this kind of amber, right? Amber traps insects and plants that could be there, for hundreds of years, even thousands of years, and it comes out as something new. It comes out as a jewel. And so, for me, a lot of my poems really are about the way that memory kind of recreates experience and how you can use art to harness these memories. And so I think I tried to sort of map that onto the poems that I wrote, and a lot of them, they were basically divided into poems about the past, poems about journeys, and poems about going forward. Maybe it's something more optimistic, but the last section was really about, limpid stones, something more, achieving a kind of clarity. But thank you so much for the question. Yeah. Yes, please.
Having read your multiple collections, can you talk about the evolution of these poems versus your first book? Because I can very much sense a difference and an evolution as a poet.
Oh, thank you. Well, I might not be the best person to answer this question, because sometimes, as a writer, as a creative writer, all of you who write creatively, it's sometimes hard to talk about your own work. I think I tried really what Bonnie kindly read in the description about this idea of estrangement and defamiliarization. I really tried to make my images, especially when they had to deal with the war in Ukraine as well as my family, I tried to make the images strange and use unfamiliar language and avoid any kind of sentimentality. That was really a conscious choice I tried to make. And so I tried to also compress the images, and I guess that is my evolution. I think I've also worked with more archival material in this collection as opposed to the other collections, and I think I tried to also have a more encompassing range of topics. I think my last collection really had to do with my mother's death and being a mother, and this collection is everything from, the war in Ukraine, my family, and my journeys and the journeys of others. So thank you for the question.
Do we have any other questions?
Yes, Maria, so great to see you.
Oh, I'm wonderful to hear you and to hear your voice.
Thank you.
And bring these poems alive. I love this initial poem about the spider. And can you say something about that, about spinning and weaving? Because when you talk about your poetry, I have the sense that you are a weaver and a storyteller.
Wow.
Why did you choose the spider?
Thank you. So my book does have endnotes. We debated with my editor, and we thought endnotes is better than footnotes. Don't ask why, but maybe less invasive, less academic, I guess. In any case, so I'm just going to read the endnote. So the first endnote states that the image of the ballooning spider, it came directly from a podcast I listened to, and it was inspired by Janine Benice and Azita Ardakani Walton in conversation with Krista Tippett. Krista Tippett, I don't know if anyone's familiar, but she has a great podcast on being. That one was particular, it was called On Nature's Wisdom for Humanity, June 6, 2024. And I was really inspired about this idea of sort of making connections and creating art, or creating a dwelling seemingly out of nothing and even seemingly out of something destructive, like Mount St. Helens. So that's kind of what I was going for there. But then, you know, there's a lot of other things in the poem, like peaches and jouissance and all of that. And I think for me, it kind of, you know, is related to my research, even what I wrote about in my dissertation. It's sort of, I'm really interested in these moments, these liminal moments that we have as humans, but also as artists, where we think we're about to achieve, you know, a state of grace or a state of understanding, but we're not quite there yet. And so it's this, yeah, this kind of liminal moment, this moment before you achieve something. And that's, I also, you know, that's why I think of the spider kind of throwing his net into nothingness. And I'm interested in that motion, or in that, and that arc of, you know, of the web, as opposed to the finished product. Yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. You know, I think of spiders as embodying a paradox of beauty and horror. They create these things of beauty, and yet we see them as monstrous in a way. And you know, I noticed that you went from the tragic to the more cheerful,
Yes.
in a way, so that your poetry sort of captures both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, thank you. As I was reading this, I thought I perhaps should have curated this better. And you know, if you know me, some of you know I work for a round table now by the 92nd Street Y, and I'm professional, you know, kind of creator of programs. But here, I just sort of I happen to read you the more depressing poems, but I have many. Yes, Alba, and then yeah.
I don't have a question. I have a comment. A couple of them. I want to say what a joy and what a pleasure it is to hear you read your poems. They're beautiful, and everything you said about them is there. Like I think you have great insight into your own work.
Thank you.
Because I was, as you speak about your work, I see it all, and I love the depth and the range, the scope of things that you reflect on, and how beautifully you connect, you know, grief and loss, as well as love and presence and beauty, all those things together. So just, I feel so happy to be here. Thank you for sharing your work.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to see you. Okay, I think there's a question from Wen, and then Sveta.
Well, I just want to agree with what everyone else has said, and also to say that I'm glad you started with depressing poems, and you could have done the whole thing on your depressing poems, because you seem to know a lot about war, and we are facing all kinds of examples. And I just wondered if there was any design in your writing about a time when, for people in this country, there's very little knowledge of war, but I think from the countries you've experienced, it's quite different. And I'm wondering if you're a kind of ambassador from that world speaking to us.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, I want to think that I lead a very privileged existence. You know, I was complaining to my friends over dinner about, you know, minor things with family and kids and sibling rivalry, but I don't know. I wouldn't call myself an ambassador, really. I think, you know, when the full-scale invasion happened, though, I just felt like I had to get involved, and I got involved in this translation project. And it's ironic, because I am actually not a professional translator at all. My husband is a great translator from Ukrainian. He learned Russian, now he's learning Ukrainian, and he's really taking it seriously. And unfortunately, it is not my forte, but I felt compelled to do something. And I think reading the testimony of these ordinary Ukrainians had brought me a lot closer to the war, to the full-scale invasion, and also getting back in touch with some members of my family in Ukraine. I'll share a happy story, which is that I received in 2022, kind of close to, I think maybe in the in around May, I received a WhatsApp message from a young man who I didn't know, and he said, "I am your relative, and I am desperately trying to get to the States. Can you sponsor me?" He gave me proof that he is related to me. He put me on a video call with an older gentleman who was my great uncle, who unfortunately died a week ago, but who I definitely remembered. And, you know, I was a little nervous because I have 2 kids and I didn't want to, you know, just put my financial future at risk, but then I realized that it's actually sort of low-hanging fruit. And I put in the application for him, and he was able to successfully make it to the States, and I actually got back in touch with him last week because his grandfather passed away, and of course that's the sad piece of news, but the happy piece of news is that Yaroslav, who is a 30-year-old man, is now married and has a little daughter. And I want to believe that at least part of that is, you know, I played even a small part in that, and that brings me a lot of joy. Yeah.
Yeah, Natalya, I just wanted to sort of echo what everyone else has said. It's such a joy to hear you read your own poetry. You really bring it to life. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking, well, one thing that really jumped out at me was that your poems interweave your own memories with your family history that you was recounted to, but you didn't experience it firsthand. And the other thing I noticed was that some of the sort of protagonists of some of your poems, like for instance, your grandfather, you speak of in the 3rd person, whereas, like for instance, the poem about your cat is an address to her. And I'm wondering sort of how you make the choices. But how do you choose between writing in the 2nd person or speaking about a family member in the 3rd person, and also how do you navigate this sort of transition or how, to what extent do you distinguish in your own mind between what you experience at firsthand and the family history that is so much a part of you, and that you also sort of bring to light in these poems?
Wow, thank you, Sveta. That's a really complicated question. I have to admit, I haven't thought about the changing of perspective. The poem about my cat was the last poem I wrote that specifically made it into this collection. I've definitely written other poems since this was published, or it was about to be published, but I begged my publisher, "Can I please put this in?" And she said yes. I think, when I was at Yale, I took a kind of a great books program, and we read some philosophy, and one of the pieces of philosophy we read is, "What is it like to be a bat?" And the short answer is, we can never tell. And so for me, there's something about the animals that really speaks to radical otherness, right? We will never know. I mean, look, I'm being cynical here, and maybe there's great, scientists among you or biologists, but I certainly do not know what's happening in my cat's mind or consciousness. I do think there's something there. And so maybe that was an unconscious but deliberate gesture of me trying to come closer to a really alien being. And I guess I haven't done that with other, well, I do address my mother. I address my mother in the poem that's called After Bishop, and in the poem I haven't read called For a Handful of Apples, about my great-grandmother dying because she was trying to get her child, who was a soldier in World War II, some apples during winter in Poltava, Ukraine, and she developed pneumonia. And in that poem, there are letters that he sends to his mother asking for these apples. So there is some 2nd person there as well. And I wrote a love poem to my husband at the end of the collection that I also didn't read, that also has 2nd person. I don't know. I really have to think about that more, about why I incorporate 2nd person as opposed to other. And in terms of incorporating my memories as opposed to family histories, yeah, I think we all have the experience of growing up and being told and retold certain stories from our families, and they're both joyful stories and they're traumatic stories, and they're being passed on, and at some point you forget, did I really experience this about myself when I was 3 years old, or am I just remembering something that's been told to me so many times? So I'm kind of interested in that slippage as well.
We do have time for, like, I'd say 1 or 2 more questions.
I'll ask a question.
Okay.
So I'll also join the club of everyone to just say how much it was great to hear you read your own work and to hear those poems come to life.
Thank you.
And I'm very happy to be here. So the question I'd like to ask has to do with what is the role of you being a multilingual person play in your poetry? And I'm just curious if you can reflect on whether you have insights or instincts even that come from sort of the syntax and the ways of expression, or just different ways of translating certain thoughts or ideas, and how that plays in your work.
Thank you. That's a great question. And that kind of goes back to Polina's question about how this collection differs from the others. I think in this collection, at least I tried, I don't know if it has always been successful, but I've tried to be more conscious of sound, of the sonic elements in my poems. And I think that does come from knowing more than one language, whether it be Spanish or Russian. I've also been learning Ukrainian. It's been a very humbling experience. I feel like, in a way, it was almost like I was robbed of this language because of Russian imperialism. But in a more positive light, it's really interesting to learn about different possibilities of phrasing, of sound. I like to incorporate some other languages in my poems. I can't really think. Well, yeah, I definitely incorporated some Ukrainian. Some of it is kind of tricky, actually, because one of the people who blurbed my book is a great Ukrainian poet, Alex Averbukh. You can read his blurb on the back. And he read my collection. He was very kind. He gave me a nice blurb. But he said, and I don't know if this answers the question, but he said, you really have to make sure that your transliteration of Ukrainian names and Ukrainian things is correct. And he pointed out several places where I was incorrect, and I am grateful to him for that. But there is a nuance there, because he wanted me to call my grandmother Halina with an H. And that is not what I called her. I called her Gala with a G. Different sound. And it does come from the fact that I grew up in this Russophone family, but at the same time, that's just what I called her. And so I actually have a footnote in the poem Symmetries of Pain that says, it was my husband's idea, but I think it was the right idea. Like, I put, after Gala, I said, yes, her name in Ukrainian would be Halina with an H, but I wanted to spell it with a G, with a hard G, because that's how I related to her. So it's very interesting. These questions can be very political sometimes, but great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have time for 1 more question, if anyone has one. Going once, going twice.
These questions have been so great. Yes, Alma, please.
Well, how do you find time in your busy life to write poetry? How do you do it?
Oh my
What's
gosh.
your secret?
I probably shouldn't say this too loudly, as there are members in the audience who I know strictly through my day job. But I have a lovely job where I work from home, and I am now technically on vacation from my job for 2 days. No, but in all seriousness, I think Roundtable and 92nd Street Y has been a great organization to work for. I feel like it is stimulating, and I also have time. It's a more flexible sort of position. I do miss the teaching. Do have a little bit of teaching going on, but I think sometimes it's strange, because when I was going to bed, I think it was because my husband was traveling. He went to New York to a poetry reading yesterday, and I was by myself with the kids, and I think I was tired, and I was thinking, especially when you have small kids, that, or if you remember, if your kids have grown, you remember that putting the kids to bed is such a it's not an ordeal, but it's such a process, right? That's the more charitable way of putting it. It's a process. It's like a whole thing. And then I kind of, something clicked in my brain, and I thought, it's so strange that we prepare, even if we don't have kids or the kids are grown, we prepare ourselves so meticulously for going to bed and for that period of sleep, that 7-8 hours, however many we get. And we almost go through these rituals of cleansing ourselves, of putting on different clothes, of, turning out the light. And then the poem just came to me, and I just wrote it like in the morning. The next day I woke up. My daughter has to go to school early, so 6:30 I was up. I just wrote the poem. It just sort of happened almost on an unconscious level. That doesn't usually happen, but it did happen with this poem. But yeah, you have to find time. It's challenging. Thank you for the question.
I'll take away from that you get enough sleep.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, a really nice note to end on, like sort of finding the places where the
Yeah.
poetry happens in day-to-day life, and making the time for it. Thank you to our audience for your
Thank
lovely
you.
questions and for being here. It's been wonderful to have you. And of course, thank you so much, Natalya, for sharing your work, for having amazing answers to these questions, and just for joining us here at the store. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much.
Let's give her one more round of applause.
Thank you, Bonnie, for having me.
Are you gonna do a book signing?
Yes, you read my mind. So, if anyone is interested in buying a book, there are some books for sale at the back counter, and Natalya will be here to sign them. Thanks again for being here.
Softball today. Send her up.
This is really great.
Excited about that. Feeling good about it. It's got the hair for it.
No worries. Oh, it really meant a lot that you came. Oh, well. Thank you. Thank you.
See you.
Okay, that's so great.